When the world goes quiet, some voices still remain. Not every soul finds peace when the clock strikes 12. There are stories hidden in the shadows, whispers drifting between the living and the forgotten. Some stories linger, some souls don't leave. Welcome to Stillness After Midnight, where every silence tells a story. If you're drawn to the mysteries that stir after dark, the voices that echo when the world sleeps, subscribe now and join us as we listen to the souls who still have something to say, because in the stillness, the truth finally speaks. I still remember the night I first saw the map. It was in a dusty stall at Panjayuan Market, where old trinkets and forgotten relics from generations past were spread out on worn blankets. I hadn't meant to be there at all. I had wandered in after a late seminar, following May and Hao, who always loved to hunt for strange things among the antiques. I was just 23 then, a student of archaeology, fascinated by dynasties long buried, but never expecting to stumble upon anything truly extraordinary. The stall was dimly lit, a single bulb swaying above us, its light trembling across heaps of porcelain shards, faded calligraphy scrolls, and coins so worn that the emperor's faces had dissolved into mere shadows. And then, beneath a stack of brittle books, I saw it. A map. It wasn't beautiful, not in the sense of artistry. The parchment was yellowed, edges curling like burnt paper. But the inkjet hadn't faded. Thick strokes of black wound across the surface, sketching out tunnels, chambers, and what appeared to be gates. My fingers trembled as I brushed dust away. "It's just another fake," Hal muttered over my shoulder, already turning to a rack of old jade pendants. But May leaned closer, her eyes wide. "No, look at the characters. They're Ming-era style. See the brushwork? No street vendor could fake that." I wanted to agree, but what unsettled me was not the authenticity, it was the detail. Every corridor, every room marked as though someone had walked them by candlelight. And there, near the bottom corner, written in faded vermilion ink, was a single warning: "Do not disturb the sleepers." The vendor, a man with eyes as clouded as rice wine, chuckled when he saw me holding it. "That piece?" His voice rasped like dry leaves. "Been sitting here for years. No one buys maps to places that don't exist." "How much?" I asked without thinking. The man raised a finger, then two, then settled on a number far too small for something so strange, almost as though he wanted it gone. I should have walked away. Instead, I pressed the folded map into my satchel, feeling its weight against my chest as though I had stolen a heartbeat that wasn't mine. That night in the dormitory, I spread the map across our desk. Jun whistled low, tapping the ink lines. "Looks like a labyrinth. See here. That could be under the old districts near Chenmen. These aren't random drawings. They match known Ming architecture." Lin, the quietest of our group, leaned against the window, arms crossed. "If this were real, don't you think the government would have found it during renovations? There's no way a whole underground city could exist without records." But I had already fallen silent, tracing one peculiar detail again and again. Near the center of the map was a circle, ringed with tiny strokes like teeth. It looked less like a plaza and more like a mouth. "Still," May said, her voice hushed, "we could at least check it out. Just once. If there's even a chance it's real, I should have refused. I should have laughed it off. But instead, I felt the pull of the unknown like a tide, dragging me deeper. That night, after the lights dimmed and the city outside fell into a restless silence, I dreamt. I dreamt of narrow alleys, lined with wooden stalls. Lanterns swayed though there was no wind. And in the distance, a woman's voice whispered a price I couldn't understand, though the market was empty. When I awoke, the map lay open on my desk, though I was certain I had folded it. The ink was darker now, glistening as though freshly drawn. 2 days later, we stood at the entrance. The map had led us to a half-forgotten courtyard south of the city center, where brick walls sagged under the weight of time. A locked iron gate barred the way, but Hao, ever reckless, climbed it with ease, motioning for us to follow. The air inside smelled of mildew and incense long burned away. Beneath a slab of broken stone in the far corner, we found it the outline of a staircase descending into the earth. I should have felt excitement. Instead, I felt watched. Each step down was damp, echoing too loudly in the silence. Our flashlights cut thin beams through the dark, illuminating walls carved with symbols, dragons coiled in endless circles, characters that looked like names but dissolved when I tried to read them. Jun muttered from behind me, "Feels like a tomb," and perhaps he was right. The deeper we went, the colder the air became, heavy with the weight of centuries. Somewhere water dripped steadily, like a clock marking time long after the world above had forgotten. At the bottom of the staircase stood a door, massive, wooden, banded with rusted iron. The hinges creaked as Hal pushed it open. Beyond was blackness, thick and suffocating, like stepping into the lungs of something that had been asleep for too long. I cannot fully describe what it was like in that first chamber. It was not empty, though it should have been. Stalls lined the walls, wooden beams still upright, shelves still laden with pottery and faded silk. Lanterns hung from beams, paper thin as moth wings, but whole as though waiting for fire. And though no one was there, I swore I heard them. Soft voices, the murmur of bargaining, the clatter of coins dropped into wooden boxes. I froze, heart pounding so hard I thought the shadows themselves could hear it. "Do you hear that?" May whispered, but when I turned she was pale, her lips trembling. Jun shook his head. "Hear what?" For a moment I wondered if the sound lived only inside me, echoing in some corner of my skull. I tried to speak, but the words stuck in my throat. I only stared at the map, unfolded in my shaking hands. And I realized with a sickening certainty that the ink lines had changed. The circle in the middle, the mouth was closer now, closer to where we stood. Even now as I speak of it, I can feel the parchment against my fingers, cool and damp, though I burned it long ago. And I wonder, when a map whispers, is it guiding you toward discovery or toward your own grave? I remember the first breath I took inside the tunnel. It was not air meant for the living. Heavy, damp, it clung to the back of my throat like a veil of forgotten prayers. Every inhale carried the faint taste of iron and soil, as though centuries of silence had decayed into dust and settled there, waiting for us. We descended slowly, our flashlight beams trembling along the stone walls. The stairs curved down and down, endless, as if designed to coil us deeper into the earth until we lost the memory of daylight. The others spoke in hushed tones, voices muffled by the suffocating air. Hal walked ahead, bold as always, his light jerking against the carved bricks. May gripped my sleeve with every step, her hand cold despite the heat of her skin. Jun muttered calculations about depth and structure, trying to ground himself in logic. Lynn trailed behind, silent, her footsteps almost too light to hear. For me, every sound was magnified, the scrape of shoes against stone, the hollow drip of unseen water, the faint whine of the flashlight when I pressed its switch. Each became part of a rhythm, steady, unyielding, like the heartbeat of something vast and buried. And then came the carvings. At first, they were simple geometric patterns along the wall, cracks that might have been mistaken for decoration. But as we moved further, the designs sharpened into deliberate shapes, dragons with unfurled wings, serpents swallowing their own tails, and characters etched with a hand that trembled between artistry and warning. I paused before one. 4 characters, each carved deep enough to gouge the stone. "Do not awaken the buried city." The edges of the characters were worn smooth, as if countless hands had traced them over centuries. Just old superstition, Jun whispered, though his voice faltered. But I felt it then, the faintest shiver, not in the air, but beneath my skin, as if the warning had reached past stone and into my blood. After what felt like hours, we reached the bottom. The staircase ended before a massive door of dark wood, its surface banded with iron strips corroded by time. The air was colder here, unnaturally so, and with each breath I could see my own exhale curl like smoke. Hal pushed against the door. It resisted at first, then yielded with a groan that echoed through the chamber like a dying animal. The darkness beyond swallowed our light. I stepped in first, more out of compulsion than bravery. My beam swept across pillars carved into the shape of guardian lions, their mouths open in silent roars. Dust spiraled in the air like faint smoke, though there was no breeze. It was a hall vast and hollow, and at its far end stretched an archway, bricked in by stone. Upon it, another warning, painted in crimson that had somehow never faded. Do not look back. May clutched my arm. Why would they? Her words trailed off when the sound came. A soft, deliberate tap, tap, tap. It echoed from deeper within, beyond the bricked archway. Slow, rhythmic, almost gentle, like the steps of someone walking in wooden clogs along stone. But there was no passage beyond that wall. We stood frozen, listening. The tapping grew louder, then stopped abruptly, leaving silence so sharp I thought I could hear my own pulse. Probably water dripping, Hal muttered, though he did not meet our eyes. Yet all of us had heard it, clear as footsteps. We pressed onward, the hall branching into narrower corridors. The air shifted stale, tinged with faint incense, as though we had intruded upon a temple where offerings had been burning for centuries without witness. The map unfolded in my hands again, though I didn't recall taking it out. The ink lines shimmered faintly under the flashlight, guiding us deeper. Strangely, I felt it tug at my gaze, drawing me to follow paths I had not meant to trace. We entered a chamber where the ceiling arched high above, lost in shadow. Stone stalls lined the walls, wooden beams still upright despite the centuries. Here the silence thickened, not empty, but watchful like the pause before someone answers you. Jun bent to examine the floor. These tiles, Ming era, for sure. This whole place, it's not just a tunnel. It's a settlement. But his words faded when a faint rustle moved through the dark, as if fabric brushed against stone just beyond our light. We spun, light sweeping, but nothing moved, only the stillness of walls. And then, almost too soft to be real, a whisper. Leave, May gasped. Did you hear? Yes, I whispered back, my throat dry. The others looked at me blankly. Hal frowned. Hear what? The voice was gone, dissolved into silence. We chose a corridor to the left. Its walls were narrower, closer, pressing in like ribs. The further we went, the stronger the smell of mildew became, mixed with something sweeter, cloying like dried flowers left to rot. My beam caught on a set of inscriptions etched into the wall, rows of names stacked like a register. Dozens, then hundreds, written with meticulous care. I reached out and traced one with my finger. The stone was warm. I recoiled, heart racing, but no one else seemed to notice. We emerged into another hall, and there it was, the first lantern. It hung from a wooden beam, paper thinned with age, its red surface etched with golden dragons. But the strangest part, it glowed faintly, though no flame burned within. A soft, pulsing light, like the ember of a dying breath. May's voice trembled. Who lit it? None of us answered. The tapping sound returned then, louder, closer, not random but deliberate, like someone walking just out of sight. Tap, tap, tap. It came from behind us. I thought of the crimson words painted above the bricked archway. Do not look back. And for the first time, I understood. We did not run. Fear did not drive us forward. It rooted us in place, heavy as stone. But somehow our feet carried us deeper, as though the city itself exhaled and drew us further into its lungs. Behind us, the tapping ceased. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. I dared not turn my head. Even now, years later, when I recall that descent, I wonder, what would I have seen if I had broken the rule, if I had looked back? Sometimes in my dreams, I think I know. I had expected emptiness. Ruins, perhaps, collapsed beams, piles of stone, a skeleton or two left forgotten by time. That was what one imagines when descending into something centuries old. Yet when the corridor widened and we stepped forward into the chamber, what I saw stole the air from my lungs. It was a market, not rubble, not decay, but an entire street preserved in silence. Wooden stalls stood side by side, their roofs intact, their counters arranged with goods long past their time, ceramic bowls, lacquer boxes, bolts of silk folded with impossible neatness. Banners still hung from beams, painted characters faded but legible, herbal medicine, tea, incense, candles. Lanterns dangled from doorways, their paper wrinkled but whole. It was as if time had paused here, mid-breath, and never resumed. Hal laughed nervously, his voice shattering the stillness. Looks like a movie set, but there was no dust, no cobwebs, no sign that this place had ever been abandoned. That detail chilled me more than any skeleton could. Jun stepped closer to one stall, brushing his hand over a porcelain cup. This can't be real. Wood doesn't survive untouched this long. His rational tone wavered. Unless someone tends to it. The silence thickened at those words, heavy as the damp air pressing against our skin. And then I heard it. A voice, faint as though drifting from a distance. A woman's voice calling out prices, words too soft to grasp, yet carrying the rhythm of a merchant's chant. I froze, pulse quickening. Did you hear that? May shook her head, eyes wide. Hear what? It sounded like someone. My throat went dry. Selling. The others exchanged nervous glances. Hal muttered something about echoes, but even he couldn't mask the unease in his face. The sound came again. Louder now, closer. A steady cadence, as though someone was rapping knuckles on a wooden counter. Talk, talk, talk. I turned sharply toward the source, sweeping my flashlight over the stalls. For an instant, I thought I saw movement, the shadow of a hand withdrawing behind a curtain. But when the beam settled, there was nothing. Only folded cloth, stacked neatly as though waiting for a buyer. We moved deeper, unwilling yet compelled. The rows of stalls stretched on, bending slightly as though forming a street. Our lights brushed over endless goods, dried herbs bound with red string, wax candles pressed with lotus patterns, fans painted with ink landscapes. Each object was whole, unbroken, as though the people who owned them might return at any moment to finish their trade. And then something struck me. There was no dust. None at all. Even the porcelain gleamed faintly under our beams. It felt lived in. I whispered, "This place, it isn't dead." May squeezed my hand, her nails biting into my skin. At the end of the street stood a tea house, its doors slightly ajar. A faint glow flickered inside. Not the harsh white of our flashlights, but the soft tremor of flame. We should have turned back then, but Hal pushed the door open and we followed. Inside, tables stood arranged neatly. Cups waited upon them, filled not with dust, but with tea. Steam curled faintly from the surface, though no fire burned in the hearth. May gasped, "It's warm." Her hand hovered above a cup, feeling the heat that rose from it. Jun shook his head violently. "No, this is wrong. This isn't possible. But before I could speak, the sound came again. This time, not a whisper, but laughter. Soft, distant, yet unmistakable. We turned, every flashlight beam jerking toward the back of the room. There, behind a curtain of beaded strings, shadows shifted. Figures sat at a table. Their outlines flickered as though seen through smoke. Their heads bent, their hands lifted cups to lips. The laughter swelled, though none of their mouths moved. And then all at once, silence. When I blinked, the figures were gone. The others refused to speak, as though naming what we had seen would give it permanence. We left the tea house in silence, stepping back into the market street. But the air had changed. It was colder now, the lanterns above us glowing faintly, though no fire burned within. Their red paper pulsed like dying embers, one by one flickering to life as though stirred by our presence. I felt eyes upon us. Every stall we passed seemed to lean closer, shadows pooling deeper, as though something within was watching from behind the curtains. May whispered, "They're still here." Her words fell like a stone into the silence. And then faintly, I heard the voices again. Not one now, but many. A low murmur, indistinct, like the hum of a crowd in prayer. The sound swelled around us, pressing in from every stall. My chest tightened, my breath shallow. Jun covered his ears, shaking his head. "Stop it! Stop it!" But nothing stopped. The voices only grew, layered, overlapping, until they seemed to seep from the very stone beneath our feet. And then, just as suddenly, silence. A silence deeper than before. So deep I could hear my own heart. We stood frozen in the middle of that silent street, 5 intruders in a city that did not want to be found. The map trembled in my hand. I swear it did, as though alive. The ink lines shifted under the light, paths writhing like veins. The circle at its center seemed darker, more insistent. I looked up, and for a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw them. Figures moving between the stalls, backs bent, hands clutching baskets, heads turning ever so slightly. Not solid, not flesh, but suggestions of life caught in the corner of my vision. I blinked and they were gone, but the feeling remained. We were not visitors. We were prey. Even now, when I think of that night, I wonder, did the city preserve itself, or did something preserve it? And if the merchants are still there, selling their goods in whispers, then who buys? We had thought the market was the strangest thing we would see. We were wrong. After leaving the tea house, the silence of the underground city pressed against us like a damp cloth. Our flashlights cut narrow beams through the dark, trembling with every step we took. None of us spoke. Words felt dangerous now, as though sound itself might wake something slumbering in the shadows. The street narrowed into an alleyway, its stalls leaning inward like watchful faces. The air grew colder, the smell of mildew sharper. Somewhere above, unseen water trickled through stone, each drop echoing like a footstep. Then we saw her. At the far end of the alley, a lantern glowed faintly. Red, paper thin. Its light wavered with no flame, cast in shadows that swayed like restless spirits. Beneath it stood a woman. Her gown was red silk, heavy and flowing, embroidered with gold that shimmered even in the weak glow. A bridal veil covered her face, long strands of crimson fabric trailing almost to the ground. In her hand, she carried the lantern. She did not move, yet the shadows around her shifted, stretching along the walls as though alive. My breath caught. The sight was wrong, not because she was frightening, but because she seemed utterly real, solid, alive. Her gown rustled faintly, though no wind touched us. May's grip on my arm tightened painfully. "Do you see her?" This time all of us nodded. The bride turned, slowly, with the grace of a dream. The veil swayed, revealing nothing beneath but the faintest outline of a face. Then without sound, She stepped into the alley. Her wooden clog struck the stone. Talk, talk, talk. The same sound we had heard in the hall. Each step echoed unnaturally loud, like the beating of a heart buried deep in the earth. We should have fled. We should have turned back, climbed the stairs, abandoned the cursed map and whatever curiosity had brought us here. But none of us moved. The bride walked forward, her lantern swaying gently, its glow pulsing in rhythm with her steps. Her shadow stretched across the walls, longer and longer, until it bent unnaturally, crawling like a creature ahead of her. Hal whispered, "She's not real, just light, reflection." But then the shadow turned toward us. I felt a chill run down my spine, sharper than any winter wind. The shadow should have mirrored her, but it didn't. It lifted its head before she did, its arms twitching like broken wings. Its fingers were too long, scraping the stone. The bride continued forward, her gait steady, unbroken. Yet her shadow rushed, crawling along the walls with grotesque speed, closing the distance between us. Jun stumbled back, nearly dropping his flashlight. "What is that, Don?" May hissed. "Don't speak." Her voice trembled, but I understood. Every sound we made seemed to feed the thing. The shadow's hand reached the ground near my feet. For an instant I felt it cold, wet, like the touch of soil freshly dug from a grave. I jerked back, heart racing, but when I looked down, there was nothing, only stone. And when I looked up again, the bride was gone. The alley stretched empty, lantern dark. Only silence remained. We stood there for what felt like hours, frozen, waiting. Nothing moved. Finally, Hal muttered, "Hallucination, that's all. Group hysteria. The air down here, it's bad for the brain." But his voice shook, betraying the lie. I wanted to agree, to dismiss what we had seen as imagination. Yet when I turned, I noticed something that silenced me. On May's wrist, where the shadow's hand had brushed her, was a faint red mark, thin like the imprint of fingers. She saw me staring and quickly pulled her sleeve down, but not before I caught the fear in her eyes. We pressed on, because turning back seemed more dangerous than moving forward. The alley opened into a courtyard. At its center stood a well, ringed with stone, water black and still at its bottom. Around it, red ribbons hung from wooden posts, faded and torn, yet fluttering faintly as though stirred by unseen breath. May's voice was barely audible. "Wedding ribbons." The silence deepened. I remembered story-sold folk tales whispered in villages about brides taken on their wedding night, about spirits bound in red silk who wander eternally, searching for the husbands they never wed. The thought made my stomach turn. We circled the well carefully. The water reflected nothing, not even our lights. As we passed, I swore I heard something below, a sigh, long, weary. Jun shone his light into the darkness. "It's too deep. Can't see the bottom." "Don't look too long," Lynn said suddenly, her first words in hours. Her voice was low, firm. "If you stare, it will stare back." We exchanged glances, but none of us dared ask her what she meant. Beyond the courtyard stretched another street. At its entrance, a lantern swayed gently, glowing faintly red. I could not breathe. It was the same lantern, the same faint pulse of light, the same shimmer of gold thread on silk beneath it. The bride stood there once more, veil lowered, lantern in hand. She was waiting. Even now, years later, when I wake in the dark, I sometimes see the lantern, floating at the edge of my vision, swaying gently. And I wonder, did we follow her deeper, or did she lead us there? I can still hear them sometimes when the night grows too quiet, those drums. Back then, after the lantern bride vanished for the second time, none of us dared to speak of what we saw. It was safer to pretend she had not existed at all. Our footsteps quickened on the uneven stones, but no matter how far we walked, The air clung heavy and damp, as though the tunnels themselves were trying to keep us. The street narrowed again, winding like the ribs of a buried beast. Our lights caught murals faded by time-painted figures in black robes, heads bowed, carrying long banners. Their eyes, though smudged with age, seemed fixed on us. Then faintly it began. Thump, a single strike. Low, heavy, echoing through the stone. We stopped. The sound was unmistakable. A drum. Hal licked his lips. It's just water, or rocks falling. But even he didn't believe it. The drum beat came again, louder this time. Thump, thump. It was slow, steady, like the heartbeat of the earth. Each note rolled through the walls and into our bones. My ribs vibrated with it, my chest tightening. May whispered, "It's a mourning drum." I turned to her. "What do you mean?" "In old times," she said, her voice barely audible, "when someone died, the family would hire drummers to lead the procession. Slow, steady, so the soul wouldn't lose its way. The sound is supposed to guide them." Jun muttered, "Guide them where?" No one answered. We followed the sound because there was no other choice. The street bent downward, curving like a spiral. The air grew colder, and with every step the drum grew louder. Then at the bottom we entered a square chamber. At its center stood a drum. It was enormous, taller than any of us. Its skin stretched tight and pale as bone. Red cords bound it to a wooden frame carved with dragon heads. Dust covered it, yet the surface trembled faintly, as though an invisible hand had just struck it. No one stood near it. The chamber was empty, yet the sound continued. Thump, thump. The drum head quivered with each strike. My mouth went dry. I raised my flashlight, half expecting to see someone standing there. But the space around the drum was vacant. Shadows pressed tight against the walls. Hal took a hesitant step closer. "It's impossible. Vibrations, maybe. Air currents." But as he spoke, the rhythm changed. Thump, 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 thump. A heartbeat. Our lights flickered. Jun swore under his breath. "It's calling something." The floor trembled faintly. Dust rained from the ceiling. Then from the far side of the chamber, we heard the scrape of wood against stone. A box slid forward. No, not a box. A coffin. It was lacquered black, edges painted with gold, though time had stripped the shine. The lid shifted slightly with each drum beat, rocking as though something inside stirred. My blood froze. May clutched her sleeve tighter, where the red mark still lingered on her wrist. "Don't look," she whispered. "Don't watch it move." But it was too late. Our eyes were locked. The coffin rocked harder. With each tremor, the drum beat grew stronger, faster, until it rattled the stones beneath our feet. Thump, 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 thump. It was no longer the beat of mourning. It was the pulse of something alive. Suddenly, silence. The drums stopped. The coffin stilled. The chamber was so quiet I could hear my own blood rushing in my ears. Then slowly, the lid of the coffin began to slide open. Just a crack. Just enough for darkness to spill out, thicker than the shadows around us. The air turned colder, sharp as ice in my lungs. Jun staggered back, whispering, "We shouldn't be here, we shouldn't." The lid shuddered, opened wider. I caught a glimpse. Pale fingers, nails long, cracked, clawing against the wood. The sound that followed was not human. A groan, low and ragged, like the earth itself exhaling after centuries of sleep. We bolted. The tunnels blurred as we ran, our lights jerking wildly. Behind us, the drum resumed, faster, louder, chasing us. Thump, 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 thump. It echoed through every passage, impossible to tell if it was near or far. At times it felt inside us, our hearts no longer our own. We didn't stop until we collapsed in another quarter, gasping for breath. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Finally, Lynn said, in a voice I barely recognized, "We have disturbed them?" Disturbed what? Hal snapped, though his eyes darted nervously around. The dead, she whispered. They built the city to contain them, not for the living. Her words hung heavy, heavier than the air. That night, when I finally closed my eyes, I dreamt of the coffin. Not of it opening, no. Of it waiting, as though the lid had moved only an inch. Enough to let me know something inside had noticed. Enough to promise it would not stay closed forever. And in the distance, always the drums. Thump, 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 guiding the lost. Calling them closer. I used to think silence was emptiness. But down there, I learned silence has weight. It presses against your chest, fills your ears until you can almost hear it breathing. After the drums and the coffin, we wandered the tunnels half blind with fear. None of us spoke, each of us clinging to the fragile thought that if we stayed quiet enough, the city might forget us. The passages twisted like veins, their walls damp and glistening. The stone etched with symbols I didn't understand, spirals, burning suns, eyes scratched again and again, as though some hand had been compelled to repeat them. At last, we stumbled back into a courtyard, and at its center was the well. It rose from the stone like a wound that had never closed. The rim was carved with faded lotus petals, their edges chipped, their beauty long eroded. Around it, broken wooden posts leaned outward, fragments of rope still clinging to them. But it was the sound that froze me. Not water, not wind. Whispers, soft, layered, countless voices tangled together. They seeped upward from the well, weaving into one another. So faint at first I thought they were in my head. But when I glanced at May, I saw her lips trembling. She heard them too. Jun shone his light down. The beam vanished into blackness, swallowed whole. No reflection, no bottom. Lin said quietly, "This is the Well of Echoes." I turned to her. "You know it?" She hesitated. Then without looking at me, she said, "My grandmother told me stories. Beneath Beijing streets lie old wells that lead not to water, but to places where the living and dead speak. The emperors sealed them long ago, but some could not be closed. They say if you listen too long, the voices will recognize you. They will follow." A shiver crawled through me. Hal laughed nervously, shaking his head. "Voices in a well? It's just acoustics, sound bouncing off stone. That's all." But even as he said it, his eyes stayed fixed on the black circle. Then, as if to answer him, one of the whispers rose above the rest. It was faint, hoarse, but I knew the word it formed. My name. I stumbled back, flashlight trembling in my hand. John whispered, "It said your name." I heard it wrong, I insisted, but my voice cracked. Then it spoke again, louder this time, clearer. It was my mother's voice. I don't remember moving, but suddenly I was at the rim, leaning over, staring into the black. My chest tightened with longing and terror. "Come home," the voice said. My mother, just as she sounded years ago, before illness hollowed her lungs. "Come home, my son. I'm waiting." The air around the well pulsed, drawing me closer. My hands gripped the cold stone. May yanked me back with surprising force. "Don't!" she hissed. Her nails dug into my arm. The whisper shifted instantly, turning sharp, guttural. A chorus of voices shrieked from the depths, overlapping, furious. The sound clawed through my skull. I fell to my knees, clutching my ears, but the noise was inside me. Then silence, as sudden as a breath cut short. The well waited, black and endless. We didn't speak of what happened, not directly, but we could not leave it either. Jun muttered, "It called you, like it knew you." I shook my head, though my hands still trembled. It wasn't her. It can't be. But in my chest, doubt bloomed. Lin whispered, "The well does not create voices. It repeats what is already lost. It feeds on memory." Hal snapped, "Enough!" We keep moving. We need to find a way out. But none of us moved. The well's presence pinned us like insects under glass. Then May pointed. Look! Her flashlight caught on something tied to the posts around the well. Red threads, frayed but still visible, knotted in patterns. At first they looked random, but as I traced them with my eyes, I saw the shape. A net. Once it must have stretched across the opening, a web of red meant to hold something in. Now only scraps remained. The whispers stirred again. This time they did not call names. They laughed. A low, rasping, endless laughter that rose from below and wrapped around us like smoke. We fled. Not running. No, it felt wrong to run near the well. We backed away, step by step, until the whispers dimmed. Even then, the sound clung to us, echoing in our ears. When at last the well was out of sight, Hal collapsed against the wall, panting. This place is hell. We have to leave, now. But there was no way back. Every path twisted into another. The city wanted us deeper. And in my chest, a truth I didn't dare admit. Part of me wanted to return to the well, to lean closer, just once more, to hear that voice again. Because if the dead could speak, what else could they promise? Even now, when I wake in the dark, sometimes I think I hear it, a faint murmur at the edge of silence. Not quite outside me, not quite within, and always, always the same words. Come home. If the well was a wound, then what we found next was its infection. The tunnels led us to a hall unlike any other we had seen. Its ceiling arched high, supported by wooden beams blackened with age. Their carvings of phoenixes and dragons, half-rotted, yet still proud. Faded banners drooped from the rafters, red once, now the color of dried blood. And beneath them stretched a banquet. A long wooden table, wide as a street, ran down the center of the hall. Bowls and plates covered its surface, though no hand had touched them in centuries. Some held dried husks of food shrimp curled like claws, duck bones brittle as ash. Others shimmered faintly, as though steam still rose from them. The smell struck first, not rot, not dust, something worse. Sweet, cloying, like fruit left too long in the sun, mixed with the metallic tang of blood. Jun gagged, covering his mouth. How can this still be here? May whispered. It's a ghost feast. Her words silenced us. I remembered the stories. Offerings left during the ghost festival, when doors between worlds opened and the dead wandered among us. Families placed food on tables or by roadside altars, hoping hungry spirits would pass them by. But this was no offering. This was a banquet for the dead. Our lights wavered across the benches. At first they looked empty. Then slowly I saw them. Shadows. They sat hunched at the table, outlines of people without features. Some leaned close to their bowls, their movements faint ripples in the dark. Others sat motionless, heads tilted as though listening. None turned toward us. Not yet. The air grew colder. My pulse hammered in my ears. Don't look at them, Lynn murmured. Her face was pale, eyes fixed on the floor. If you see them too clearly, they'll see you back. But I had already looked. One shadow stirred. Slowly it raised a cup, the motion so human it turned my stomach. The cup tilted, and though no liquid spilled, I heard it. The faint trickle of wine. Another figure bent over its bowl. A sound followed the scrape of teeth against bone. The banquet had begun again. Jun whispered, trembling, "We should leave." Then every shadow stopped. The hall froze in silence, and together, slowly, they turned their heads toward us. Their faces were blank, but I felt their gaze like knives pressing against my skin. My flashlight flickered, dimmed, then steadied. In that instant of weakness, the shadows multiplied. Where once there had been dozens, now there were hundreds filling every seat, stretching into corners we had not seen. The table groaned under their weight. A hollow voice rose, not from one figure, but from all of them together. Sit. The sound rattled the banners overhead, shook dust from the rafters. It was not a request. May clutched my hand. Don't. Don't move. But Hal stepped forward. His face was pale, sweat glistening on his forehead. If we sit, maybe they'll let us go. Before we could stop him, he lowered himself onto an empty bench. At once, the shadows around him leaned closer, their outlines sharpened as though feeding on his presence. One lifted a bowl and placed it before him. I smelled it even from where I stood. A stew thick with iron, sour and sweet, steam rising though no fire burned. Eat, the voices hissed. Hal stared at the bowl, trembling. It's not real, he muttered. It can't be real. But when he reached for the spoon, his hand passed not through shadow, but through something solid. The liquid rippled. I wanted to pull him away, to scream, but the shadow's gaze pressed against my throat, choking sound from me. Hal raised the spoon. His lips trembled. For one horrifying moment, I thought he would obey. Then he dropped it. The clatter rang through the hall like a gunshot. Instantly, the shadows shrieked. The sound was unbearable, 1,000 mouths opening in rage. The air vibrated with their fury, the banners tearing free, whipping through the air like living things. We ran. The hall twisted around us. Longer than it should have been, the exit retreating as though mocking our desperation. Shadows lunged from the benches, their arms stretching impossibly long, fingers clawing at our backs. One grazed my shoulder. My body went numb, cold seeping deep into my bones. At last we stumbled through the far door, slamming it shut behind us. The screams cut off. Only silence remained. We collapsed in the dark corridor, gasping. Hayos' face was ashen, his eyes wide and empty. His hands shook uncontrollably, and when I touched his wrist, his skin burned with fever. May whispered, he took their invitation. He sat at their table. Lynn bowed her head. The feast has marked him. Hal didn't respond. He only stared at his trembling hands as though they no longer belonged to him. That night, when sleep finally dragged me under, I dreamt of the banquet hall. I was seated at the long table, a bowl before me. Shadows pressed close on either side, their whispers a chorus. And when I looked down, the stew in my bowl was not food. It was my own reflection. Its lips moved. Eat. I thought I had grown numb to the city's horrors. The whispers from the well, the drums that shook the coffin, the shadows at the feast each had stolen a part of my fear, replacing it with something colder. But that night, when we stumbled into the avenue of banners, I understood that the city still had ways to break us. The streets stretched long and straight, wider than any before. Tattered lanterns swayed above, their paper torn but glowing faintly, as though fed by unseen breath. Crimson banners hung from poles on either side, some shredded, others untouched, their silk rippling though the air was still. The silence was heavy. Even our footsteps sounded muffled, swallowed before they could echo. Then faintly, I heard it. Clop, clop, clop. The sound of hooves striking stone. We froze. The rhythm grew louder, joined by the faint rattle of wheels, the creak of wood, and then music. High-pitched pipes, their notes thin and mournful, weaving through the stillness. Drums followed, slow and steady, different from the ones that had shaken the coffin but no less suffocating. A procession was coming. At first we thought we could hide. We pressed ourselves into a doorway, our lights extinguished, breaths held. The glow reached us first. Lanterns, dozens of them, swaying in the dark, carried by figures in long white robes. Their faces were veiled, their steps unnaturally synchronized, not shuffling, not stumbling, but gliding as though their feet never left the ground. Behind them came men in black, beating small hand drums in rhythm, their heads bowed. The sound rattled through my ribs. Each beat another nail hammered into silence. Then came the palanquin. Red silk draped its sides, embroidered with golden phoenixes. 4 figures bore it on their shoulders, their faces hidden, their movements stiff, mechanical. From within the palanquin came the soft chime of bells, delicate yet piercing. Jun whispered so softly I barely heard, "A wedding." But May shook her head, eyes wide. A funeral. Both were right. The procession was both. The palanquin stopped directly in front of us. My chest tightened. The silk parted, and she emerged, the lantern bride. Her red veil trailed along the ground, her gown gleaming, though no light touched it. She carried no lantern this time. Instead, her hands held a length of crimson silk, long enough to drag behind her like a trail of blood. Every figure in the procession turned their veiled heads toward her. The music ceased. The drums fell silent. Only the sound of her footsteps remained. Tock, tock, tock. Each strike of her clogs against the stone echoed down the street, filling the silence until it was unbearable. She stopped, and slowly her veiled head turned toward us. I felt my blood turn to ice. Her face was hidden, but I felt her gaze burn through the fabric, through the dark, through me. The silk in her hands shifted, curling slightly, as though alive. It slithered across the stone toward our hiding place. Hal whimpered. His fevered skin glistened, his eyes wide and empty. "She's here for me." "No," May hissed, clutching his arm. "Don't move." But the silk reached his feet. It wrapped around his ankle with the gentleness of a lover's touch. Hal screamed. The sound shattered the silence. At once, the procession moved. The figures surged forward, not running, not walking, but gliding in a single wave. Their veils snapped in an unseen wind. Their drums thundered. Their pipes shrieked. The silk tightened around Hayos' leg, yanking him from our grasp. He fell hard, dragged across the stone, his nails scraping furrows in the dust. We lunged for him, but the procession swallowed him whole. For one frozen heartbeat, I saw him among them. His mouth open in a soundless scream, his arms thrashing. Then just as suddenly, his movement ceased. His head bowed, his body straightened, his feet falling into the same unnatural rhythm as the others. He had joined the procession. My stomach lurched. "No!" Jun shouted, but Lynn held him back with surprising strength. Her voice was cold, steady. "If you step into their path, you won't return." The music swelled, deafening. The palanquin shifted, the bride's veil swaying as she stepped back inside. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the procession moved on. The lanterns drifted down the street, their glow fading. The drums softened. The music thinned, became distant. And then there was nothing. Hal was gone. We stood in silence, our breaths ragged. May trembled, her sleeve falling back to reveal the mark on her wrist. It had darkened, the red deepening like fresh blood. "He was taken because he sat at their table," she whispered. "The feast marked him. The procession claimed him." Her words sank into me like stones. This city was not random, it was deliberate. Each step, each encounter, part of a design we could not see, and we were being led deeper, one by one. That night sleep did not come easily. When it did, I dreamt of the procession. I was among them, dressed in white, a drum in my hands. My head was bowed, but my eyes saw everything. And at the front, the bride waited, her veil stirring though there was no wind. The crimson silk reached toward me, coiling around my wrist. I woke with the taste of dust and iron on my tongue. The city grew quieter after Hal was taken. Not because the streets were empty, but because we had lost the sound of his breath, his questions, his nervous laughter that had once filled the silence. Every corner now seemed louder in its stillness. Every shadow leaned closer. We walked without speaking, None of us dared mention his name, as if to do so would call the procession back. The crimson banners still swayed above us in my mind, though when I looked up, there was nothing but dust and cracked stone. It was Lynn who first noticed the smoke, thin and pale, curling upward from behind a collapsed archway. It wasn't the black smoke of fire, but something softer, like incense. The scent followed soon after, sweet, woody, tinged with resin. It was out of place in this buried world, too human, too deliberate. We pushed aside the fallen stones and found ourselves standing before a small temple. It was unlike the grand halls we had seen in photographs of old Beijing. This was modest, almost fragile. Its wooden beams rotted, its roof half collapsed. Yet it still stood, as though some invisible hand had preserved it against the ruin. Two stone lions guarded the entrance, their jaws chipped, their eyes filled with dust. Between them hung a plaque, its characters so eroded I could not read them. Inside, the air was thick with incense. The smoke swirled as if stirred by a wind that did not exist. And then we saw them, rows upon rows of figures. At first I thought they were children, standing in silence. But when I stepped closer, my stomach tightened. They were dolls, hundreds of them, wooden bodies, cloth garments, painted faces, each different, yet all staring forward with the same blank, unblinking gaze. Some held tiny paper lanterns, others clutched prayer scrolls. A few were broken arms missing, faces cracked, yet still arranged neatly in lines. At the very front stood a larger figure, nearly as tall as a person. Its face was painted with serene eyes and a faint smile, but the cracks in its wood made the expression unsettling. Its hands were pressed together in a gesture of prayer. May whispered, "Joss dolls used in rituals, offerings to guide souls." Jun swallowed hard. Then whose souls are they guiding? No one answered. The altar was covered in ash. Candles had burned down to stubs, their wax pooled like frozen tears. Bowls of rice, long rotted, sat untouched. Yet the incense burned freshly, its stick glowing red as though placed moments ago. I felt the weight of eyes on us, not just from the dolls, but from something beyond them. Lynn stepped forward. She knelt before the altar, bowing her head. Her voice was steady, almost rehearsed. "To the spirits who dwell here we mean no harm. We are lost, and we seek only safe passage." The smoke thickened. The dolls seemed to lean closer, their shadows stretching across the floor. And then softly, the sound began. Whispers. Not loud, not distinct. Just the faint rustle of voices, as if hundreds of throats spoke beneath the floor. The dolls' painted lips did not move, but the sound seemed to come from them. May clutched her wrist. The red mark there pulsed, darker now, almost glowing. "They're praying," she said. Her voice was trembling. "But it isn't for us." "What do you mean?" I asked. Her eyes filled with tears. "They're praying for themselves." A chill crawled through me. I turned my gaze back to the larger doll. Its serene face seemed to shift in the flickering light, its faint smile widening, its eyes narrowing. For an instant, I swore I saw its wooden hands twitch. Jun stumbled back, knocking over a smaller doll. It fell to the floor with a hollow crack, its painted face splitting. The whispers ceased. Silence swallowed the room. And then, one by one, the dolls turned their heads. The sound was faint but unmistakable, the creak of wood, the scrape of joints. Hundreds of painted faces now stared directly at us, their eyes lifeless yet filled with something far worse than emptiness. Yoon's breath came fast. We need to go." But the doorway was no longer empty. Shadows pooled there, thick and shifting, blocking our escape. The incense flared, its glow brightening the smoke until it was almost blinding. And in that haze, the larger doll moved. Its head bowed lower, its hands pressed tighter in prayer. The whispers rose again, no longer soft but urgent, overlapping, desperate. May cried out, clutching her ears. They're asking to be released. They're trapped, every soul bound into these dolls. The realization struck like a hammer. This was no temple of safety. It was a prison. The smoke pressed against us, choking, forcing us down. My knees hit the floor, my palms scraping against the dust. The doll's painted eyes bore into me, each one a soul pleading, accusing, demanding. I tried to speak, to beg, but my throat closed under the weight of the incense. My vision swam, and then through the haze I saw him. How? He stood among the rows of dolls, his face pale, his eyes blank. His hands were pressed together in prayer, just like theirs. No, I croaked, reaching for him. But when I touched his arm, it was wood, painted, cold. He was gone. The large doll's head lifted. Its painted eyes met mine. And then, in a voice that was not wood, not human, but something caught between, it spoke. You do not belong here. The words were a whisper and a roar, echoing in my skull. My vision darkened. When I opened my eyes again, we were outside. The temple was gone. Only rubble remained, half buried under dust and stone. No incense, no dolls, no altar, nothing. But in May's hand was a single wooden figure, small, crudely carved, its painted face cracked. She stared at it with horror. It followed us. Lynn touched her shoulder, her face pale but calm. Not at him. Hao is still with us. The words sent a cold shiver through me. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw rows of dolls bowing in unison, whispering their prayers. And at the very front, the larger figure still knelt, its smile widening, its hands tightening, forever praying for release. I wondered if one day I too would join their ranks. A silent prayer, bound in wood, lost in the city that never let its dead leave. The temple of dolls left us shaken. May carried the small wooden figure wrapped in cloth, as though hiding it could soften the weight of what it was. But we all knew. Hao was gone, and yet not gone. Every time she shifted her grip, I imagined the doll's painted eyes flickering open inside the cloth. We walked deeper into the city. The streets narrowed, the air heavier. Stone gave way to carved walls, their surfaces etched with scenes of ancient battles, parades, executions. The figures in the carvings were worn, but the eyes, those were sharp, etched deeper, as if the stonecutter had obsessed over them more than anything else. Jun muttered, "Why do they all stare?" No one answered. The passage opened suddenly into a vast chamber. I had expected ruin, dust, silence, but the room was alive with color. Every wall was covered in paintings. Silk scrolls stretched from floor to ceiling, their surfaces crowded with figures. Emperors on golden thrones, generals on horseback, women in crimson robes carrying lanterns, priests bowing before altars. The brushwork was exquisite, the pigments still vibrant despite the centuries. But what struck me most were the eyes. Every painted figure, thousands of them gazed outward, their dark pupils gleaming with unnatural clarity. It was as if the room itself was watching. We stood frozen at the threshold. The silence pressed hard, heavy with something unseen. May whispered, "It feels alive." Lynn raised her lantern. The glow danced across the walls, catching on the painted eyes. For a heartbeat, I swore I saw one blink. I told myself it was the flame, just the flicker of light, nothing more. But then another blinked, and another. Jun stumbled back. "Did you see that?" This time, none of us could deny it. The eyes were moving. The painted figures shifted subtly, their gazes turning, following us as we stepped further in. It wasn't sudden. It was patient, deliberate, like predators tracking prey. The chamber seemed to breathe. I felt my chest tighten, the weight of 1,000 stares pressing into me. No matter where I looked, eyes met mine. Some curious, some accusing, some hungry. Then came the sound, a faint scratching. At first I thought it was rats in the walls, but it grew louder, sharper, scrape after scrape, like brushes dragged across silk. The paintings were changing, colors bled, shifting, reforming. A painted general lifted his spear higher. A maiden's lantern swayed in a wind that did not touch us. Priests bent lower, their painted mouths opening in silent chants. And slowly the eyes in the paintings grew darker, rounder, too real. I could see reflections in them, reflections of us. May clutched the doll tighter, her knuckles white. They're not just paintings, they're windows. Her words sank in like cold water. Windows, and something was looking through. Lynn ordered us to keep moving, her voice calm but tight. We followed the curve of the chamber, our steps echoing too loud. The eyes tracked us. Some widened, others narrowed, and then from behind I heard a voice. Soft, familiar. How? I spun around. He stood painted on the wall, his likeness perfect. The clothes he wore when he was taken, the blankness in his eyes, the crimson silk coiled around his wrist. His painted mouth moved soundlessly, as if calling my name. I stumbled forward before May grabbed my arm. No, it's not him. But I couldn't look away. The painting of Hao raised its hands, pressing against the silk surface as if trapped beneath it. The scratching sound grew frantic, coming from inside the wall itself. Then with a sound like tearing fabric, a painted hand broke through. The silk split, a pale wooden arm stretching outward, its joints stiff, its fingers clawing the air. Jun screamed. More arms followed. From every direction, the figures in the paintings pressed outward, their eyes wide, their mouths opening. Hands broke through silk, grasping, reaching. The chamber was no longer still. It writhed. We ran. The floor shook beneath us, dust raining from the ceiling. Painted priests tried to drag themselves free, their silk robes tearing as they clawed into our world. The scratching grew deafening, joined by whispers that overlapped, layered, 1,000 voices speaking at once. Words I didn't understand, but that clawed at my mind like hooks. At the far end of the chamber, a set of doors loomed. Wooden, heavy, carved with dragons whose eyes gleamed like polished stone. We pushed against them, but they didn't budge. The painted hands were inches away. Lynn drew a piece of chalk from her pocket. I didn't even know she carried it. Kneeling, she scrawled characters across the stone floor, her movements fast but precise. May knelt beside her, whispering old prayers through clenched teeth. The whispers from the walls grew louder, angrier. The eyes glared. The paintings convulsed. Then the chalk glowed faintly. The dragons carved into the door stirred, their stone eyes flaring. With a sound like thunder, the doors opened. We stumbled through, slamming them behind us. The chamber fell silent. We collapsed in the darkness beyond, gasping. My ears still rang with whispers. My eyes still burned with the sight of Hao's painted face pressing from the wall. Jun sobbed quietly, his hands shaking. They almost had us, they almost pulled us in. Lynn's face was pale, her breath ragged, but her eyes were steady. That chamber wasn't meant for the living. It was a prison, like the temple. The eyes weren't just watching, they were waiting. Mai unwrapped the cloth in her arms. The doll was still there, its painted face unchanged. But I noticed something new. Its eyes were darker now, and when I looked closely, I swore I saw tiny figures reflected in them. Painted figures, trapped, watching. That night I couldn't close my eyes. Every time I blinked, I saw the chamber again, the painted armies pressing forward, the eyes unblinking, the hands tearing through silk. And worst of all, I saw Hao, still painted on the wall, still calling my name, his painted mouth forever open in a silent cry. The chamber of painted eyes left us hollow. We didn't speak as we walked, each lost in the echo of whispers that still clung to our ears. The silence wasn't relief. It was exhaustion, the kind that gnaws at the edges of the mind. The streets narrowed into alleys, the air thicker, damp with a metallic tang. Dust fell in faint streams from the ceiling above, reminding us that we were deep beneath the bones of Beijing. Yet the city felt infinite, stretching further than any living city above. It was May who first heard it. Dong a low, resonant chime. We froze. The sound was too deep, too clear to belong in these ruins. It vibrated through the stone under our feet, rattled the dust from the walls, sank into our bones. Jun whispered. A bell, another chime answered. Dong. The rhythm was wrong, not steady, not keeping time. Instead, the intervals shortened. We followed the sound, though every step felt like surrender. The alley opened into a square. At its center rose a tower of blackened wood and bronze, impossibly tall, its spire lost in shadow. The structure seemed to lean, as if straining under its own age. Yet it stood firm, rooted like a tree grown from iron. At the top hung a bell the size of a house. Its bronze surface was etched with patterns, dragons, clouds, flames, that twisted and shifted as the lantern light flickered. But it wasn't alone. Around the tower, dozens of gears meshed and turned, some the size of doors, others no larger than coins. They clicked and whirred, their rhythm uneven, mechanical yet alive. No hand powered them, no weight, no pendulum. They simply moved, and with each shuddering rotation, the great bell tolled. Dong. The sound rolled over us like a tide, thick and suffocating. Lynn murmured, almost to herself, it marked something, but not time. She was right. The tolling didn't count hours. It didn't divide the night. Each strike came sooner than the last, the pauses collapsing, as though the bell rushed toward an end it could not delay. May clutched the doll in her arms, her lips pale. It's counting down. Jun shook his head violently. Counting down to what? No one answered. We approached the base of the tower. A staircase spiraled upward, its steps slick with age, its railings wrapped in chains that pulsed faintly with heat. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but some pull curiosity, desperation, or perhaps the city itself drew us upward. The higher we climbed, the louder the machinery became. The grinding of gears, the hiss of unseen pistons, the groan of wood under impossible weight, and beneath it all, the steady heartbeat of the bell. Dong, the air grew hotter. Sweat trickled down my spine. My lantern shook in my grip, its flame stretching thin in the oppressive air. At last we reached the chamber beneath the bell. It was vast, larger than the tower could possibly contain. Bronze gears lined the walls, their teeth meshing in intricate patterns, moving with terrible precision. Chains hung like veins, carrying weight from unseen places. And in the center stood the pendulum. It was not a simple rod of iron. It was a blade long, curved, gleaming with a red so deep it seemed wet. The pendulum swung slowly, cutting the air with a whisper that made my skin crawl. Each time it reached the end of its arc, the great bell tolled. Dong, the sound shook the chamber, rattled my teeth, pressed tears from my eyes. May gasped, pointing upward. Figures were suspended in the gears. At first I thought they were statues carved guardians, perhaps. But then one twitched, another shuddered. Their limbs were entangled in the machinery, their torsos bound in chains. Every rotation of the gears pulled their bodies taut, bones creaking, mouths opening in silent screams. Their eyes found us. Jun retched. They're alive. I wanted to deny it. But the truth was there in their stares, in the slow movement of their chests, in the way blood seeped not fresh, but endless, as if the machinery fed on it. The tower's clockwork was not powered by gears alone. It was powered by them. The bell tolled again. Dong. The interval was shorter now, nearly half the pause of the last. My chest tightened with each strike, as though the sound itself crushed my ribs. May staggered, clutching the doll. Her wrist, the one marked by the feast, glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the bell. "They want us," she whispered. "The tower, it's hungry." The pendulum swung closer, the blade catching the lantern light. For a heartbeat, I saw my reflection in it, my own face pale, eyes wide, lips trembling. And behind me, another reflection. How? He stood just beyond my shoulder, his wooden body rigid, his painted eyes unblinking. His mouth opened, but no sound came. Instead, the bell tolled for him. Dong-ai staggered back, nearly toppling over the railing. Jun caught my arm, shouting, but his voice drowned beneath the next toll. The pendulum's swing grew faster. The gears turned quicker. The screams of the chained figures blended into the grinding of iron. The countdown was reaching its end. Lin's voice cut through the noise, sharp and commanding. "We can't stay here. Move!" We fled down the staircase, our steps frantic, the tolling of the bell chasing us. The tower groaned, its gears shrieking, the heat rising like fire. Dong, dong, dong. The rhythm collapsed entirely, the strikes nearly merging. By the time we burst into the square below, the sound was unbearable, the air shaking with its fury. We ran until the tower was only a shadow behind us. Then silence. The bell did not follow. The air was still. The dust settled. We collapsed against a wall, gasping, our ears ringing, our hearts racing. Jun whispered, "What was it counting down to?" No one answered, because we all knew. The final toll had not come. It was waiting. That night I dreamt of the pendulum. It swung above me, its blade dripping, its arc shortening. Each time it passed, it shaved away part of my shadow. And in the dream, I realized something terrible. The bell was not counting down to an end. It was counting down to me. The tolling of the bell faded, but its echo lingered inside me, like a heartbeat that was no longer mine. We walked in silence, each step heavier than the last, as if the city itself pressed down on our shoulders. The streets changed. No longer crooked or endless, they began to slope upward. The walls closed in, carved with patterns that felt deliberate, rows of figures bowing, lines of script too ancient for me to read, spirals that pulled the eye toward a vanishing point. May whispered, "It's leading us somewhere." None of us wanted to admit the truth. The city had always been leading us. We reached a wide courtyard. At its center stood a gate. It was vast, rising higher than any structure we had seen, its frame carved from black stone that glistened as though wet. Twin pillars held the arch, each wrapped in coiled dragons whose mouths gaped wide, fangs bared. Between them stretched a veil of shadow, not wood, not stone, not iron, just darkness, thick and shifting, as if night itself had been woven into a curtain. The Gate of Returning Shadows. I knew its name without anyone speaking it. The city whispered it into my bones. We approached slowly, lantern light trembling. The ground before the gate was littered with bones. Human, animal, some too twisted to name. Among them lay broken masks, splintered dolls, fragments of painted silk. Every piece of the city we had seen, the procession, the temple, the chamber, the tower was scattered here, as though all paths ended at this place. Jun swallowed hard. "Is that the way out?" Lin's face was unreadable. "It's the only way." But May shook her head, clutching the doll tighter. "It's not an exit. It's an exchange." The air around the gate shimmered, and from the darkness figures began to form. They stepped out one by one, pale and silent. The veiled procession, the whispering dolls, the painted priests, the chained victims of the tower. All the souls we had seen, all those trapped within the city's rituals, now gathered before the gate. And among them Hao. He stood at the front, his body shifting between wood and flesh, paint and blood. His eyes met mine, blank yet pleading. May cried out, rushing forward, but Lin caught her. Wait. The figures did not advance. They simply watched, waiting. The gate pulsed, the shadows thinning just enough to show what lay beyond. Light. Not lantern light, but sunlight. Golden, warm, real. The streets of Beijing above, freedom. I felt tears sting my eyes. After everything, the whispers, the processions, the bell, we could finally leave. But the city's voice hissed in my mind. No one leaves without leaving something behind. The truth struck me. The gate demanded a trade, a shadow for a shadow, a soul for a soul. May trembled. It wants one of us. Jun backed away, shaking his head. No, no, we've come too far. We all make it out. All of us. But the figures around the gate stirred, their whispers rising, their eyes fixed on us. The city disagreed. Hao stepped closer. His voice, cracked and hollow, reached us. Let me go. For the first time, words. His lips trembled, his form flickering, but his plea was clear. May sobbed, clutching the doll to her chest. No, no, I can't. Lin's hand closed over hers. It has to be him. I wanted to argue, to fight, but deep down I knew. Hao was already claimed. Half here, half gone. The city had marked him long before the gate. If we tried to deny it, the city would take us all. May stepped forward slowly. Her hands shook as she unwrapped the cloth. The doll lay within, its painted face cracked, its wooden eyes dark. She whispered something I couldn't hear, pressed her lips to its forehead, and set it on the ground. The shadows surged. Haos form shuddered, then collapsed inward, dissolving into smoke. The doll burned without flame, its wood curling into ash, and the gate opened. The veil of shadow tore like fabric. Light spilled through, warm and blinding. I stumbled forward, unable to resist. But as I crossed the threshold, I felt something tug at me, a weight. I looked back. The city stretched endlessly behind us, its streets still alive with whispers, its towers still groaning, its painted eyes still watching. And in that moment, I realized the truth. We had not escaped. The city had let us go, because it wanted us to carry it with us. When I woke, I was lying on the streets of Beijing. The night air was cold, the sky above filled with smog and stars. Cars honked in the distance. Life moved on, untouched. Jun and Lin lay beside me, dazed but alive. May knelt on the pavement, her hands empty, her eyes hollow. Of Hao, there was no trace. We never spoke of what we saw, not to friends, not to family, not even to each other. But sometimes when the city above falls silent, I hear it again. The toll of the bell, the whisper of painted lips, the scrape of wooden joints. And in the corner of my vision, when shadows stretch long under the streetlights, I see the gate, waiting. Because the city beneath Beijing is not gone. It is patient. It remembers. And one day, it will open for me again. Thanks for watching the whole video. Please give me a like and subscribe to the channel to watch more interesting stories.